we had a pretty interesting situation. We were forced to fire the bass player. Like the recorded songs are one thing, but when you bring them to a live show, some things do not really work. If that fails, you're screwed. Like big time screwed. Rehearsals with backing tracks and planned shows, like super planned shows, are more efficient. Yeah, you can have the drummer playing the hi-hat like but yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. Some people care about the fact that there's a backing track and that there's instruments that you can hear, but they are not on stage.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go.
Which is the best way to approach your live show? Playing all instruments with no click, or playing with some instruments, a backing track, a click, and even some voiceover indications for your musicians. In this episode, we're going to talk about different approaches to address your live show, as well as pros and cons for those different approaches. And based on my own experience, we're going to talk about how to actually make it happen. But first, I'm going to tell you why do I think this is important for you. And this is important for you because these different approaches can yield very different results. And you may discover very interesting points that you can apply to your own show. So let's do it. First of all, I know this is kind of weird. Benedict is in the US working in a recording project. So he asked me if I could do my first solo episode today. And here we are, accepting amazing challenges, right? So if you're new to the show, just know that I'm not the usual main host, because the main host normally is Benedict Hein. But I'm Manel Espinosa. I'm a music producer and mixing engineer from Spain. And as I always say, I like to work with artists and help them bring their raw demos to a finished song that, they will probably love forever. So, yeah, this is kind of weird for me. Kind of weird for me to do this introduction. I'm so used to Benedict doing this. So, yeah, if you're already a listener, welcome back. As always, we're very pleased to have you back. And yeah, I hope that you love this episode so that I can do this more often, I guess, right? Anyways, welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about something that's not strictly or directly related to recording or mixing or producing or songwriting like we normally do. We're going to talk about something that's related to your live show, because I know that, you guys, our listeners, you are normally, I guess, producers, artists, you are, mixing engineers, even mastering engineers, everything at the same time, self-recording bands, And I know that, lots of bands and lots of artists, at the end, probably your main goal or the reason why you record your songs is because you want to bring them to a live stage. You want your songs to be like your door that brings you to, a tour or some live shows or whatever. And given that in the past months, I've been working in very, very different live shows, I would love to talk about these two very different perspectives in which you can build your live show, right? One is going to be the more like raw, organic way, and the other one is, I would say, it's more prepared, or yeah, I would say it's more prepared, the millimetrically prepared, or something like that we could say. And both are fine. I'm not saying one of those is better than the other one, but they are very different, and the shows end up being very different. So the thing is that I play in a cover band that's called Enjoy. I know we have a really good name for our cover band. And in our cover band, we normally play in a trio or quartet format. And yeah, we basically play all the instruments that you can hear. Like we have the classic formation with guitar and vocals, bass and drums. And sometimes we add another singer, but not always. So we like to approach our show in a way that we have a lot of freedom and we can improvise a lot. But we're going to talk about that later on, uh, you know, more deeply because I don't want to give you everything now, right? And the second approach is very different because I've been working, in the past month, I've been working with an artist, with a Spanish artist called Goma. And I've been working with him as a guitar player, but also musical director. So I've been in charge of basically making the show happen and producing the songs for the live show, right? Because I'm a strong believer that, the songs, like the recorded songs, are one thing, but when you bring them to a live show, some things do not really work properly, or better said, you can take the most out of some parts of the songs when playing live, right? Um, so in this show, it's very different because we used backing tracks with a computer, and we used a click that everyone could hear in their in-ear in-ear monitors. And we also had some voiceovers that I recorded to, indicate some different parts of the songs or when the song starts and stuff like that. So those are the two biggest approaches, I would say. Of course, there's a lot of things in between and combinations. We're going to talk about that also. But I would say those are the main approaches. So we're going to talk about pros and cons of those two approaches. And we're also going to talk about, or I'm going to tell you how we approached the second show, like the more elaborated, the more prepared show with backing tracks and all that, because it's a bit more, I would say, technically difficult to do. But we'll talk about that in a bit. So we're going to start with the first approach, which is playing with no click, no backing tracks, and nothing at all, like only the musicians with their instruments, which, I mean, it is enough, of course, but, it's different. So some of the pros are that you have maximum freedom to like follow the vibe of the room. And that's something we like to do in our cover band. Because, for example, we normally have a established set list for every show, but we like to sort of see or watch what kind of people are in the venue and kind of guess which songs they like to hear. So at some points on the show, we might introduce a song that wasn't in the set list, for example, or change the order of the set list to kind of fit the audience that we're seeing, right? And another thing that we like to do a lot is, for example, let's say you're playing a song that's very energetic and you feel like, people, they are giving everything, they are giving you everything, they are giving you that energy and you're giving it back and stuff. But the next song is a ballad. So you can choose to, take another energetic song from the set list and put it before the ballad, so that you have two energetic songs. You have two energetic songs, and you can keep the momentum for a little while more, right? So those kind of things, you can do it only if you don't have to follow a backing track or a click and stuff like that. Of course, we like to change the songs along the way and give us freedom to improvise, right? Like we do this thing a lot of like repeating the choruses more times if we see that people are singing, for example, or we can repeat the chorus but at a lower volume so that you can really hear people singing and you can, tell them that you want them to sing and stuff like that. It is true that some of those things at the end of the day, they stay in the set list forever. Like when we play a song and we extend the chorus and we see that it works, it is very likely that we're gonna keep doing that in every show because it's probably always going to work, right? But sometimes we improvise things along the way, and sometimes the result is really good and they stay, and sometimes it's not as good, right? And we also can do things like extend guitar solos, which is something that I love. Not really. I'm not a big guitar solo guy, but sometimes it is the right thing to do because I don't know, we might need to get the song a bit longer because we need to get or save some time and stuff like that. So those little things, those changes basically make the songs no sorry the every concert, every gig is unique, it's different. There's no single concert that is the same. Cons of this approach: the obvious one is that, yeah, if you're not using a click and you don't have a strong drummer who can keep the tempo pretty much the same throughout the whole song, you might have a big problem. And basically because of two reasons, I would say. Because if you don't have a stable drummer, it is gonna be very difficult to lock in with him, right? Because if it's fluctuating constantly and in weird ways, it's gonna be very difficult to, as I said, lock in with him and groove with him and make people also groove and move and dance with you, right? Of course, that also can happen if you have a bass player who doesn't know how to keep up with the tempo, right? And another problem that can happen is that, at least in my experience in this kind of shows, with all the adrenaline and all the emotions that you're putting into your playing, also with people, interacting with people and all that, most of the times we tend to play faster. And that can be a problem if you're playing a 2 hours show like we do normally, and you have a set list that you've prepared for that day. And if you start to play all the songs faster, you will, you will finish the set list, you will finish all songs, and you would have not completed the 2 hours. And that can be a problem if someone hired you to play for 2 hours, right? So you have to really take care of that and try not to play too fast and have some additional songs just in case you need them, right? And of course, the last con that this approach has is that if you don't have good communication skills with your bandmates, it's also going to be a problem, right? Because we developed a language between us in which I'm normally the singer and guitar player, so I cannot really look at them all the time, right? But they know that there are some gestures that I do that mean something. Like, for example, I normally do this thing with my hand, at the end of a chorus, and that means we're going to repeat the chorus and do it at a lower intensity, right? So we developed this kind of language and we understand each other really well. So we can communicate quickly when we need to change things on the spot, right? So if you don't have that language developed, I guess you can have problems and you can have misunderstandings. And I mean, we even have them sometimes, right? But so you have more risks of misunderstandings, right? Because no one knows what's going to happen. So, and yeah, regarding communication, it is also very important that the singer or the one who leads the show has good communication skills with the audience, right? That, of course, can be developed with time. You're not gonna be born with that, or maybe you are, but it can be developed with time because I wasn't really good at that, and I think now I'm pretty decent, or at least we get shows all the time, so I guess it's not that bad, hopefully. So that's very important because, if you want to interact with people, if you want to read what people need and all that, you need to communicate with them. You need to, be funny at times. Of course, our live shows are pretty particular because we are a cover band. It's not exactly the same as having your original songs band, or it really depends on the on how you approach your live show at the end, But I think it's crucial to have these communication skills, especially if you're using this approach. And now I'll tell you why when we get to the next one. So we're gonna get to the other approach, the more prepared, like millimetrically prepared approach to a live show, right? Where we play with a click, we have a backing track, and we also have some voiceover indications to tell you when a chorus is coming, or that sort of thing. So pros are, of course, consistency and structure every night. Like every show is basically the same. Of course, things happen and things are not exactly strictly the same, but basically the show is the same, and you cannot change the structure of the songs. Or I mean, maybe you can, but it is way more difficult, right? And of course, it's more consistent because you're gonna play with a click. Everyone is listening to the click, and if you are used to play with a click, everyone is gonna lock into that click, and it's gonna be fine, right? Of course, it can be difficult because some people do not like that, right? And you kind of have to get used to play with a click and with someone telling you things on your ear. So, of course, the biggest advantage, probably, I would say, is that you can play instruments that you could not play in any way, like in any other way, for example, like another, some guitar licks that you cannot play because you only have one guitar, for example, or maybe you have two guitars, but there are some things that you cannot play, some keyboards, and you don't have a keyboard player, or anything like that. You can do that using a backing track with all the elements. You can also play backing vocals with on the backing track and stuff like that. And actually, in our show with Goma, we had a pretty interesting situation, which is that we were forced to fire the bass player. Originally, we had guitar player, which was me, a bass player, a drummer, and then the singer. But the bass player didn't know the songs, and we gave him two chances. But yeah, we ended up fire him 1 week ahead of the show. But even that we were using a backing track and the project and all that, we could just unmute the bass tracks and have a bass basically right away. We had to adjust some volumes and stuff like that, but it was there already. So that's an advantage. You can do things like that when you're using a backing track. It saves, I would say, using a backing track and having a very planned show saves rehearsal time, but there's a disadvantage there that we're going to talk about when we get to the disadvantage part. But once you are there in the rehearsal show, in the rehearsal room, and you have everything planned, if you have already planned like I did, then I think that rehearsals are very smooth because everyone knows what's happening and what's coming and all that. So now we're going to get to the cons. And the first con is what I was telling you, is that, rehearsals themselves are maybe quicker, but you have to prepare a lot for the rehearsals. Like the preparation is insane. The amount of hours that I had to put on or in, I don't know if that's on or in, to prepare the show, to prepare all the backing tracks, to make sure everything was right, all the metronomes, all the clicks, make sure of what guitar tracks I was going to play and which ones we were going to throw in the backing track. So it took a lot of time. Also, I changed a lot of things in the structure of the songs because that was the point, to produce the songs for the live show. So we basically ended up extending the most of the songs because some of them were very short, and we could really make use of some parts of the songs. Of course, it has an obvious technical risk, which is that if you're using a computer or any other device to send those backing tracks and click tracks and all that, if that fails, you're screwed, like big time screwed. So you better have a backup plan or something like that, because if you don't and things go wrong, yeah, you're gonna have a really bad time. And yeah, as I said previously, when using this approach, you have less flexibility to extend the songs, in that moment. You can plan it ahead, but you cannot do it in the moment. Maybe you can do it, but you would have to also have it really like super prepared so that you can stop the backing track and play it again and continue at the same point or something like that, which would be even crazier than what I did. So I guess there's a way, but any case, you have less flexibility to change things on the spot. And so there's two stories that I want to tell you about these two approaches, right? And the first one is that in our cover band, one day we had the idea in the middle of a gig to bring the husband and the wife, because we were playing on a wedding, right? And play some sort of game with the crowd in which, there was gonna be the husband team and the wife team, and they basically each team had to sing the song as loud as possible, and then we would decide a winner and continue the song, and it was crazy and it worked really well. And that happened one day on the spot because I had, for whatever reason, I had this idea and I tried it and it was amazing. So we kept on doing it over and over in every show. And yeah, with regards to the other approach, I've had many moments, not in Goma's show, but in other shows where we had backing tracks, where we had to stop the backing track because we were lost for some reason, or someone, like especially the drummer, who has a lot of responsibility here, got lost and forgot about one part of the song, and we had to stop the backing track. So in that case, it wasn't that big of a deal because we were not, like, we didn't have important things on the backing track like the bass or stuff like that. We only had more like synths and stuff. And also there's this concert I played with my old band. It was called Pellicana. It was I don't even know how to call it, but we played like ska, reggae, pop stuff, even funk things, whatever, this mixture of things. And we were playing a festival, and we were sending the backing tracks through a tablet, right? And the thing fell down and it was broken and crazy and all that. We finished the show anyways, but so it's just that that those things happen. So we have some stories. So now we're going to talk about practical considerations for both these options, right? And the first practical consideration is, of course, budget and logistics. In the first case, you're going to need lots of musicians if you have lots of instruments and you really want to play all the instruments, right? And that for a band might not be a big problem. I mean, you maybe need to get a bigger band to go to the concerts, But for a single artist, for a solo artist, that can be something to take into consideration because, if you're using a backing track, you probably have to use less musicians so that you can save up a little bit of money there, right? So sometimes having a backing track is the only way to make it financially viable if you want to put on a very dense show, right? But on the other hand, I also love the idea, like we do in our cover band, to adapt the songs to power trio format or whatever, because it's an interesting experience, and we don't always need to play every single thing we can find on the songs, right? And yeah, of course, there are, as I said, there are a million ways to set up the backing tracks for your live show. But the way that I did it, just in case you're wondering or you want to do it but you don't know how to do it, I had my computer, this one actually, and I had a Logic project there with all the different tracks. You know, the track for the click, the track for the voiceover thingies that I recorded, and the backing track, the bass track, and yeah, and that was it. And then we had a portable mixing desk, one of those that do not have knobs that you can control through a mobile phone or also a computer, whatever. So it was connected to the computer, and I had, I just had every track was sent to a different channel, and then that was routed into the mixing desk so that only the musicians were getting the click and the voiceovers. Of course, I don't think it would be pleasant for the audience to hear the click and my voice saying like chorus 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be funny, but yeah, I think that's something to desire, right? So yeah, that's the way we did it, but there are tons of ways to do it. You can do it with specific gear to do that, but I've never used any of that. But if you have any questions about how to do it or you want to do it and do not know how, you can leave us a comment here on YouTube if you're on YouTube or Spotify or whatever you are, or maybe you can send us an email or whatever. And I'd be glad to help you as much as I can. So another practical thing to take into consideration that we touched on a little bit before is the rehearsals, right? Because yeah, without a click, without tracks, I think rehearsals tend to be more fun probably because they are less organized, and you can also improvise during the rehearsals and find, new ideas, new things, stuff like that, which you can't really do if you're using backing tracks. But the thing is that, as I said, rehearsals with backing tracks and planned shows, like super planned shows, are more efficient. And if you don't have a lot of time, like it was our case, I think it's interesting to, do it like that because it's very efficient. And we had 20 songs, like 20 original songs from the artist, and we had 3 rehearsals to, to have the songs and have the show ready for the concert. So we didn't have a lot of time, and it was very, very efficient and smooth. Like we would rehearse the whole thing, making notes, and then the following day I would come back with backing tracks adapted to the notes we did. And the cool thing also about the voiceover things is that if there's a part where you see that you guys get confused all the time for whatever reason, you can just record a voiceover to kind of, remember that while you're playing, and that problem will be gone. So, yeah, practical things, right? And then with regards to touring and consistency, also, as we said before, if you have a really tight timeline, like that you have to play 1 hour and a half or 45 minutes or whatever, when you're playing on a festival and you have to do these crazy fast changes and checkups and all that, sound checks and stuff. It is interesting to have a really millimetrically planned show because you know exactly how much it's gonna be. Whereas if you don't have a planned show and you're playing everything live, time can fluctuate, but you also have more space to improvise and make up for that time if you need more time or if you have to be faster, right? So again, very different approaches, very different ways to make a show, put on a show, but none of them is better or worse, I think, right? Then we're going to talk about the psychological or performer perspective of these both approaches, right? Because, playing to a click can make some players feel secure if you're really used to a click, but some people really hate playing with a click, right? I remember that back then I would really hate playing to a click, and I've played in bands where it was only the drummer, the one who was listening to the click, right? And all the others, we would not listen to the click. It would only be the drummer. But nowadays, I'm used to it, and I like hearing the click because it also gives you more possibilities. Like again, if you're playing with a backing track and a click, if you want to start the song with the guitar, if the guitar player do not have the click, sorry, it's just impossible to make it happen on time, right? So, or yeah, you can have the drummer playing the hi-hat like tss, tss, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. And as well, as I said, with a click, it happens the same with voice over things, right? It can be very, very distracting when you're not used to it, to be like singing a very emotional part and then hear a voice in your head like, I don't know, singer, remember to do this or that, Again, you can get used to it as with a click, but at the beginning it can be very, very weird, I guess. Yeah. And there's the other point here, which is the audience perception, right? Because I know some people doesn't care about the fact that there's a backing track and that there's instruments that or tracks that you can hear, but they are not on stage. But some people are also very picky about this, right? And I guess this also depends on the type of music you're playing, the genre, I guess the cultural space and conditions of the place you're playing in or the genre you play and all that, right? It's something that's kind of worth discussing, but yeah, I don't have much else to say. It's just that depending on what your project is about, maybe one option or the other fits better with you and with your audience. So take that into account. And finally, the last point here in this solo episode is that there's also a middle ground and there are also hybrid options there, right? Because we've talked about this black and white thing, but it doesn't have to be like that. You can, for example, use tracks to make some, ambient moments between songs, to make some cool transitions between songs, but not to use them while the songs are being played. You can also play with a click, as I said, for example, a click that only the drummer is listening, but everyone is playing their instruments and there are no backing tracks. And also you can have a backing track that has very sparse or subtle elements. It doesn't have to be with the bass and guitars and stuff like that, like we did, partly because we had no other options, right? But yeah, the thing is that I would say it doesn't really matter what option you choose, but consider what problems might arise and always have a backup plan, right? Even if you're playing your instrument and that's all about it, like you're playing instruments and there are no backing tracks and all that, always have a pair of strings just in case something happens with the strings or whatever. Anyways, so to wrap up, let's summarize a little bit. I would say that, again, there's no right or wrong, as we always say in the Self-Recording Band podcast. It's about finding the way that fits your current situation, right? You don't even have to choose one of the options forever. You can start playing raw and super organic and at some point move to a more planned show depending on your situation, right? There's no right or wrong. It's just one situation has some pros and some cons, and the other has also some pros and some cons. But there's no right or wrong. Again, I've said this. I've said this too many times. So I would like to know, how do you guys run your shows? Do you have any doubts, or do you prefer the raw energy of playing all the instruments, or do you prefer having a backing track and a click and some voice-over indications? Let us know. We'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below, or whatever you want to post that. You can also, again, you can send us an email and tell us about your experience. We'd love to hear it. And yeah, so this is the end of this solo episode. My first solo episode. I hope you enjoyed hearing or listening to this Spanish guy talking live show experiences and so on and so forth. Yeah, so I guess I would say that if you need someone to help you with your live show, you can always send me an email and we can talk about it. We can talk about which approach can you take and how can we tackle that, I guess. And yeah, I don't know how to end up, how to close this episode, but I guess this is it. So thank you for listening if you are still here. And see you in the next episode. Goodbye.